Chapter 1 The Satellites Aren't Broken. Hello guys, narrator here. We are going to start the story where entire US is transported into another world. Story starts with a pathetic loser god monologuing what to transport. So here it goes. Not this, nor that. The inhabitants in this one are still using flint spears. That's not going to be useful at all. No intelligent creatures in that one. A few moments later. What the? These are somewhat advanced and look similar to my mortals, but they are not acceptable. They look terrifying, and what's with their armor? They even have a god emperor of some sort, not using them. Aha, finally. This one seems fairly advanced, not super terrifying, and the mortals in this one look similar to my mortals. I suppose I should investigate it. I can only use a part of it. Sometime later, I could just, use one so I don't disrupt much. I'm pretty sure whoever is in charge of this world won't mind. Right, that one seems to be the most powerful one according to this thing that these mortals call the internet. Let's just use that. Sometime later. This is far more complicated than I thought. Why did they place their military all over this world? I have to make sure that I summon them so that they won't collapse the moment they get to my world. Well, this internet thing is quite useful in making sure I summon everything. July 18, 2019 AD. Heaven of Earth. God. What is it, my child? I think you have to look at this. God looks down on Earth. Narrator here guys, I think this universe's Earth God should quit his job. Anyway, let's continue our story. Quote. 0505 July 18, 2019 CE. Washington, D.C., United States of America. The sun was peeking out of the horizon on a seemingly normal day in the United States of America. Since it was about an hour before the rush hour, the streets of its capital made little sound. On a table near a bed, a phone rang. What now? I still have. The person on the bed opened his mouth in a yawn and rolled his body towards the clock that was on the table. An hour and a half. He reached out with his hand and grasped his phone. He slowly put it to his ear. What is it? This better is important. You know how I like to sleep. The voice over the phone line sounded worried. Mr. President, it's urgent. We need you in the Situation Room now. Sounds like my Chief of Staff, John Wills. Are we getting nuked, invaded, or is there some kind of crisis? No, but not important. The president hung up without waiting to listen. Give me 15 minutes, he mumbled to no one as he closed his eyes. 15 minutes later. The president was sitting on his chair in the Situation Room. The Situation Room was a room with one big table and multiple chairs surrounding it. There were also TVs on the walls around the Situation Room and one large TV situated in the back. There were also other rooms around the Situation Room which consisted of officers who were receiving information and processing it. The National Security Council and advisors were all there in their seats and the officers were present in the other rooms. The National Security Council consisted of President Ronell Hay, Vice President Maxwell Woggs, Secretary of State Katarina Clifford, Secretary of Defense Kralson Roberts, Secretary of Energy Kobe Elliott, and Secretary of Homeland Security Lenny Clark. The advisors were the Chief of Staff John Wills, National Security Advisor Blair Howards, and Homeland Security Advisor Taylor Skye. Mr. President, you can't always ignore us. John sounded very annoyed. The president sighed. I know, John, but you should get used to the fact that I like to sleep. The president looks at everyone in the Situation Room. What is it this time? The last time I was called because of urgent matters was when the Middle East was falling apart. What is so important that you have to call me during the most important part of the day? My bedtime. There was a tense silence for a few seconds before John decided to continue talking. Sir, it's going to be hard to explain, but we think we might not be on Earth anymore. After he said that, the president just sat there and stared at his chief of staff for a good minute. John, it might be easier if you look at our satellite images. John swings his chair towards the main TV and turns it on. It showed a planet that was similar in size and shape to Earth. The president stares at the image. What the? That seems just like, wait, what's with all these continents? That continent seems like North America. Canada looks a bit weird and Mexico doesn't exist. Are you telling me that that's the United States of America? Quote. Sir, that's what our satellite indicates. This is not going to be good. Sigh. Great. Just great. More sleepless nights. Okay. So what do we know? Well, let's at least gather as much info as we can. Well, we are unable to communicate with any foreign countries, but we still have all of our satellites. That's confusing. If we are on another planet, why do we have our satellites? How about the satellites of other countries? It seems that only ours are in space. What is this? This does not make any scientific sense. It could make more sense if a part of the stuff in space and a part of the Americas to be transported to another place. Like an anomaly that affected that area. However, our satellites are quite scattered. We have about 900 of them in space. It's weird since only specifically American satellites got transported. Anything else? If I may, Carlson, the Secretary of Defense, was waiting patiently for John to finish. Go ahead, Carlson. Well, it seems all of our major foreign military bases are spread out in a pattern across what used to be Canada. So in addition to the satellites, our foreign military bases were transported with us. This gets stranger by the minute. How many is that, and what do you mean by spread out in a pattern? It should be about 50 in total. Also, it seems that our men and equipment in minor foreign military installations, on the battlefield, and stationed in other areas that are not in the United States somehow wound up near where the major military bases are. The pattern seems to be naval bases on the coast, army bases inland, and air force bases further inland. They all seem to have a similar distance to each other. Moreover, the ships that we had deployed overseas have reported that their positions have changed to our coasts. They are also spread out in a pattern. So what I am getting here is that even though the United States is not on Earth anymore, anything that belongs to it, even if it wasn't in the United States, also got transported here. It's as if someone picked up the United States and its possessions and deliberately moved it to another world. The phone in the Situation Room started ringing. The Vice President, Maxwell, picks it up because he was the closest. Okay, so all of the foreign ambassadors disappeared. Okay, I will relay this to the President. He puts the phone down. What is it, Maxwell? Sir, it seems like all the foreign diplomats in the embassies in the United States have been replaced by their American counterparts. People who weren't American citizens were probably transported out. So basically, the assets and the people of the United States from Earth were transported to this place. Except for probably a few minor military buildings and embassies, we can assume that. This solves quite a lot of our issues, like our debt to other countries, and creates much more. Taylor, do you think we might need to impose martial law to keep order? Most likely not. This shouldn't cause major panic and the police can deal with minor unrest. The states themselves can send in the National Guard if things get too out of hand. Quote, well, I suppose I need to prepare for a cabinet meeting and address the nation. How much information should be released? Sigh, this is going to be a long day. More nights of not much sleep. 0630 July 18, 2019 CE. The TV crews from all major networks were swarming the North Lawn. The president was in front of his podium with the North Portico in the background. He was about to address the nation on the unprecedented and bizarre situation that had occurred. My fellow Americans, as of 5 a.m. Eastern Time today, the United States finds itself in an unprecedented and bizarre situation. Although we cannot confirm everything yet, we seem to have been transported into a new world. The following information is what we currently know. We seem to have lost all contact with our previous world and all non-US citizens have disappeared. However, the people and possessions of the United States, even the ones not on US soil, have been transported along with us. Our military bases in foreign countries have been transported to the lands we considered as Canada in our previous world. All American satellites are currently in the space of this world. My fellow Americans, I ask for all to remain calm as your government seeks more answers. May God bless the United States of America and may He watch over us in this new world. 0645 July 18, 2019 CE. Inside the cabinet room, the president and most of his cabinet were convened for an emergency meeting. The cabinet included members of the National Security Council and the Chief of Staff. The cabinet meeting also includes the Secretary of the Treasury Stephen White, Attorney General Laura Wallace, Secretary of the Interior Kirby Richmond, Secretary of Agriculture Irving Patton, Secretary of Commerce Michelle Sue, Secretary of Labor Solomon McClark, Secretary of Health and Human Services Brady Saunders, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development Francis Moody, Secretary of Transportation Daniele Paul, Secretary of Education Leon Crawford, and Secretary of Veteran Affairs Alvin Johns. The president looked at everyone. As all of you have been informed, we have been transported into a new world. Because of this, we have many urgent issues we need to solve to survive in this new world. Irving, can we sustain our population using our production? Mr. President, I can guarantee you that the United States has a rate of more than 100% food self-sufficiency. However, we might be unable to produce some exotic crops. We might be able to find some exotic crops in this world. Good. Michelle and Solomon, some of our companies are going to be hit hard by this. Especially the ones that have foreign branches. Also, some businesses might be hurt by a lack of workers. I need you two to sort this out. Both spoke at the same time. Understood, sir. Krausen, I need the bases that are in. The president paused. I suppose we can't call it Canada anymore. He pondered a bit. An alternative name. The Northern Frontier. I want the bases in the Northern Frontier to explore their surrounding area. We are already doing that, sir, Krausen said confidently. Good. Now, the most important part of this meeting. Kobe, can you tell us our oil consumption and production? I'm afraid that I might need to announce to the American people that there will be a restriction on oil use. We currently consume about 19 million barrels per day and we produce only about 9.3 million barrels per day. That's a deficit of about 9.7 million barrels per day. We will need to greatly increase our production to keep up with the consumption. I recommend that as of right now we tap into our strategic petroleum reserves. It's also a good thing that we have about 36.5 billion barrels of proven oil reserves. So we need to ramp up the production from our oil companies. That's true, sir. Good. Well, on to the next important resource. In addition to our oil issue, we probably need to ramp up mining of metals since we can't import them anymore. Probably easier said than done. The environmentalists are not going to like either of these. Well, desperate times call for desperate measures. That reminds me, I haven't eaten breakfast yet. The president immediately stood up and bolted out the door. The Secretary of Energy looked at everyone in the cabinet room. What was that about? Everyone looked at each other and shrugged. Narrator here guys, I think Eastern Europe, Israel and Taiwan gonna be fucked after US disappearance guys. Let's continue the story. Chapter 2: The Civies, the Military, and the Birds. 0600 July 18, 2019 CE. Suburbs of Nashville, United States of America. The alarm was beeping like there was no tomorrow. Jack groggily got out of his bed like a zombie after he shut down his alarm. Sigh, another day. 45 minutes later. After brushing his teeth, taking a shower, and getting dressed, Jack went into the kitchen to cook his breakfast and to make his coffee. A day like any other. Jack brought his cup of joe and his breakfast to the table in front of the couch and reached for his remote. I wonder if anything interesting is happening today. I still have 25 minutes before I need to go. Jack turned on the TV in front of the table and started with his breakfast. Really an unprecedented situation. Many Americans feel apprehensive about the future. Scientists are very baffled at how this could have occurred. For more information on the ongoing situation, we now go live to our White House correspondent Jimmy Hess. Jimmy, can you explain what the president is doing about this situation? Jack was savoring his bacon when the news caught his attention. Well, Jane, the president has just convened an emergency cabinet meeting to discuss the current situation and how we should respond. We should be hearing from the president again very soon. There was a long pause. Thank you, Jimmy. For the viewers that are just tuning in for the 7 o'clock morning news, we will replay the president's address to the nation. Jack started sipping his coffee while listening closely to the TV. My fellow Americans, as of 5 a.m. Eastern Time today, God bless the United States of America and may He watch over us in this new world. Jack took the time to process that like a computer that just downloaded a massive file. He then proceeded to stare at the TV in disbelief before ejecting the coffee that was still in his mouth. What the fuck? New world? What do they mean new world? Jack fumbled for his remote and started frantically switching through the channels on the TV. It was all about the same situation. In the past, America was called the New World, but now we have stumbled upon a true nay. Be fearful of what this means for the United Santa. Americans react to a new world. New whoa, holy shit. This better is an April Fool's joke, it's already past April. Jack then noticed that he spat all of his coffee onto his pants and table. After tidying up, Jack picked up his phone and started dialing his main man Jerry. After a short ring, Jerry picked up. "Jerry, man, have you seen the news?" "Of course I have. You always seem to be behind on what's happening. Do you know what the exact fuck is happening?" "Well, it seems like the whole world has gone crazy. According to the news, Mexico is now just an ocean and Canada disappeared. My family also can't contact my grandparents in England anymore." 15 minutes later, Jack exited his apartment building and got into his car. "I'm going to be late, but I'm pretty sure the boss wouldn't mind. I mean, like, this weird shit that's happening should be enough explanation for why I am late. Sigh, I wish that this was just another day." Jack turned on his engine and started to back out. Life seemed somewhat normal even with all this going on. Maybe it is another day. 10:59 July 18, 2019 CE. Rose Barracks, Germany. Sergeant Kevin Vander was sitting in his room in the barracks and reading a book. He was a driver for an M1126 infantry carrier vehicle, or a Stryker ICV for short. He was part of the Iron Troop of the 3rd Squadron, Wolfpack, of the 2nd Cavalry Regiment of the 7th ATC, Army Training Command under the USAREUR, United States Army Europe, that was based in Germany. Today was just like any other day, and it was going to be chow time soon. 11:13. July 18, 2019 CE. Rose Barracks, Germany. This romance novel is great. I never thought that I would actually like it. Thought it was dumb that Brian actually liked this. All of a sudden, the base alarm started blaring. What the PA system came on. "All personnel, report to your units. All personnel, report to your units." Holy shit, are the Russians invading? Kevin rushed out of his room and bolted down the stairs. Some of the soldiers that were goofing off in the barracks were already running down the stairs. Although it wasn't full panic, there was an air of urgency. When Kevin exited the barracks, men were running around like ants. Kevin started going towards his troops area. Something doesn't feel right. Kevin paused and looked up at the sky. Although it was supposed to be nearly noon, the sun wasn't up in the sky. Instead, it seemed like the sun was just barely coming out of the horizon. It's already past 11 a.m., the sun is supposed to be up there and not down there. It isn't supposed to be rising like the early morning. What the hell is happening? I hope this isn't because of the Russians. Kevin arrived at his troop's designated area. He went to where his section was. Brandon Watson, a staff sergeant and the commander of Kevin's Stryker, and the infantry squad of his Stryker were there. Kevin's captain, the commanding officer of the Iron Troop, was at the front of his troop. The other troops of his squadron were on his troop's sides with their captains. At the very front and middle was the lieutenant colonel, the commanding officer of the entire 3rd Squadron. Once everyone was there, the lieutenant colonel started speaking. "Men, our guards have noticed a sudden and unexplainable change in our surroundings. We have also noticed the disappearance of our friends, the Germans. However, we are still able to contact Washington." While the colonel is talking with high command, he has ordered the 2nd Squadron and our squadron to secure a surrounding perimeter about 1.5 miles away from the base. The Regimental Engineer Squadron will be setting up fortifications about 1 mile behind you once the perimeter has been established. Your job after establishing the perimeter is to protect the engineers while they set up the fortifications. The 4th Squadron will do recon a while after the perimeter is established. 1150-0450 July 18, 2019 CE. Rose Barracks, Germany, somewhere far north of Michigan. Kevin was sitting in his Stryker and looking out of the driver's hatch. Their squadron had secured the plains that were east of the base about 15 minutes ago. The 2nd Squadron had secured the plains a bit outside of the forests that were far west of the base. The engineers should have started work already on the fortifications behind them. Kevin learned about what was happening by listening to the comm channels. According to the other soldiers who somehow caught wind of what the brass was saying, we were transported to another world along with the other bases in the United States of America. We also seem to be somewhere north of Michigan in what used to be Canada. That would explain why the sun was just rising. I'm pretty sure that the Russians or the Chinese, maybe even aliens, might have used some secret advanced technology to get rid of us. The infantry was standing around in front of the Strykers and talking. Brandon, the staff sergeant, was on the commander's hatchboard looking at the horizon. 0550 July 18, 2019 CE. Rose Barracks, Northern Frontier, far north of Michigan. Kevin overheard from the radio that part of the 4th Squadron will arrive in about 15 minutes to do recon outside of the established perimeter. It was already an hour and everyone was as bored as hell since nothing was happening. There was a sense of tension that was mostly dissipated by now. All the squadrons that were protecting the engineers were ordered to retreat behind the fortifications once the engineers were done. It seemed quite calm even though the surroundings seemed like a foreign country. All of a sudden a loud noise was heard in the distance. Huh, that sounded like a bird. Everyone in the area turned and looked towards the distance. For a bit, there was nothing. Then, a continuous and loud sound began. It sounded like a huge flock of birds. Out of the horizon, a single bird appeared. It seemed like a normal bird. Kevin could see it all the way from here and its size is too normal for that loud of a noise. Wait, if we could see it all the way from here. Before Kevin knew what was going on, the font bird propelled itself, dived, and landed in front of the infantry. Holy Bloody Mary and Jesus Christ. It was a colossal, red, and vulture-like bird that was about 2 stories tall. Everyone was stunned and bewildered for a second. One of the infantrymen, Ruth, was standing right below it. Ruth, look out! Someone shouted and everyone noticed that the bird had its beak open. The bird's head dived down and lifted Ruth with its beak. Then the bird pointed its beak upward. Ruth's head was in the bird's beak and everyone could see that his legs were out of the beak and flailing around. Then he was swallowed. Holy shit! Open fire, open fire, open fire! M4 carbines and M249 saws from the infantry started lighting the giant bird up. The bird reared its head like it was in pain and started screeching. Brandon got back into the striker and the striker's .50 calories M2 Browning machine gun started firing. The other strikers followed. The .50 cals went through the bird like paper. The bird was cut down in an instant. It was a bit of an overkill since they didn't expect this to happen. It seemed as if it was over just then and everyone sighed in relief. Then the radio crackled. It was the captain of our troop who was in another striker. We got more company incoming. All striker units fire when within range. Infantry retreat behind the strikers and open fire if the birds get close enough. The 4th Squadron is coming in as reinforcement. ETA about 5 minutes. Aw shit, Kevin looked through the driver's viewport and saw that a huge flock of birds was drawing near. Their fur color was different from the first and was bright orange. It seemed like a fire was moving toward them from the sky. The rifles and machine guns started firing again. It was the music of the battlefield. Although they were cutting them down by what felt like the hundreds, the birds were getting closer. They had started to back up in order to get some distance. The birds didn't seem terrifying but the amount of them was overwhelming. The strikers poured heavy machine gun fire into the flock while the infantry did whatever they could with their rifles and light machine guns. The infantry was more effective when the birds closed in. When a bird started a dive, multiple small arms fire ripped it apart. The birds in front of the massive flock faced hail upon hail of .50 cals from the strikers which tore through the birds. Then all of a sudden, explosions rocked the air. Several birds fell out of the sky at the same time. Behind the 3rd Squadron, there was the 4th Squadron Striker MGSs with their 105mm cannons. The Striker MGSs had loaded M1040 canister shots which were extremely lethal to massed assaulting infantry. In this case, it seems to be quite lethal to massed assaulting birds. Additional 4th Squadron Strikers armed with .50 cals also arrived. Just in damn time, Kevin's staff sergeant commented. 0615 July 18, 2019 CE. The fight only lasted about 20 minutes before the birds started to retreat. With the help of the 4th Squadron, the 3rd Squadron was able to hold off against the birds without suffering heavy casualties. The birds got close multiple times but the immense firepower that hammered the birds was enough to ensure that the birds didn't swoop down on them. The canister shots were extremely effective and tore through multiple birds with every shot. Kevin sighed in relief. Well, seems like the days are going to be more exciting now. Those damn Russians transporting us to another world. I'm pretty sure this is all those damn commies' fault. Brandon was looking down at Kevin. You aren't thinking that this is the Russians' fault, are you? Well, of course it is. What else could it be? Every damn time with you. It's not always the Russians. Then what about aliens? A massive sigh came from Kevin's staff sergeant. 0720 July 18, 2019 CE. Washington, D.C., United States of America. I just finished my breakfast. What is it this time? The president was back in the Situation Room after being forced to quickly eat his breakfast. I told you guys I will be back once I finish calmly eating. Mr. President, this is extremely urgent and we can't wait for you to finish your breakfast. John, you have literally dragged me to this room twice today. Now, what is it? Well, Mr. President, it seems like giant birds are attacking our military bases in the northern frontier and the towns on the border with it. Giant birds. We have some footage of one of these in Ogdensburg, New York. A shaky video that seems to be taken from a person's iPhone appears. A giant bird appears to land on a street near a Sunoco gas station. Police sirens are also heard in the background. OMG. Look at that. OMG. It's tearing up a house. The video cuts off. This is definitely not our world anymore, isn't it? How concerning is the current situation? I can imagine all the work I have to do now. Sigh. Well, it's my job and the American people are depending on me. I mean, I am dedicated to changing America for the better, but what is happening right now is ridiculous. Well, Mr. President, attacks like these are occurring at random places on the border. However, since it's usually only one bird, police are able to deal with it with small arms. On the other hand, our military bases inside the northern frontier are experiencing large numbers of these birds. Currently, most of them have fought them off with minimal casualties. We currently believe that casualties are well below 100. I suppose that this isn't that big of an issue. Increase the DEFCON level to 4 just in case. We also probably need to send in the National Guard to protect the border with the northern frontier and supply anti-air to our bases in the northern frontier. Chapter 3 Uncharted Territory, 1300 August 22, 2019 CE. Washington, D.C., United States of America. It has been a little over a month since the United States had been transported to this world. People are still getting used to it, but they have remained relatively calm and no major incidents have occurred so far. Problems with resources were being solved. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve was used for a short time while oil companies ramped up production. It was a good thing that the Strategic Petroleum Reserve had 713.5 million barrels of oil. President Ronnie Hayes, Secretary of State Katarina Clifford, Secretary of Defense Crowson Roberts, and Secretary of Energy Kobe Elliott had been talking for a while in the Oval Office. Mr. President, according to our experts, the northern frontier is a treasure trove of resources. My department and the experts believe that the region is rich with oil and a variety of metals. It's perfectly untouched land with a number of resources that are beyond our wildest dreams. That's pretty good news, Kobe. The negative impact we will experience in being transported to this world just lessened by tenfold. However, we still have to worry about those phoenix birds attacking. The president sighed. Crowson decided to interject. Well, Mr. President, I believe that our military might be able to push back these phoenixes. Although they come in large groups, they can't launch a massive assault on us. And why is that? That's because it seems like these birds are separated into something like tribes. They seem to attack and destroy other tribes. Well, that sounds even better. Once we push the birds far enough, we can start exploring and extracting some of the resources that the northern frontier can offer us. I feel like I'm Thomas Jefferson. With that out of the way, let's talk about something more complicated. Crowson, your report on the satellite images. What satellite images? Oh, for God's sakes, Crowson. The images of possible civilizations on this planet. Oh yeah, Mr. President, through our satellite images of this planet, we were able to find civilization. However, we are unsure whether or not they are human civilization or some other possible being. Adjutant, the satellite images. Crowson's adjutant hands him a suitcase. Crowson opens it up and displays the satellite images on the table. Okay, as you can see here, Mr. President, we have found multiple cities scattered throughout this world. This means that there are intelligent beings in this world. From our observation, all the continents are quite populated. One thing we noticed about them was how different the technology level was between them. What do you mean by different? Well, here's an image of a city on a continent that is about 6,000 or so miles south of us. As you can see, they have medieval castles and seemingly medieval cities. However, if you look at the coast of this continent, there seems to be a large amount of something that looks like World War I era coastal guns. In addition, if you look at this continent that is about 6,000 miles southwest of us, they seem to be in the World War I era. What is with this disparity? Well, we believe that the more developed nations might be safeguarding their technological advancements from spreading to the less developed nations. It's like how Great Britain during the Industrial Revolution tried to prevent their technology from spreading. However, in this world, it seems that the developed nations have been more successful. The president considered things and directed a question at the Secretary of State. So how are we supposed to approach these nations? Well, Mr. President, we aren't quite sure. Heck, we aren't even sure if they are human. For all we know, they could be intelligent insects. I'm pretty sure that if we try to approach them, we will be fired upon. There seem to be a lot of hostile states, as you can see by the coastal guns of the continents south of us. In addition, if you look at the continent that has World War I era technology, you can clearly see a massive no man's land that cuts it in half. It seems to be more militarized than the Korean DMZ. The president looked over the satellite images. Do you think it's a better idea to let them approach us? I highly doubt they have noticed us yet, seeing that no one seemed to live on this continent because of those phoenixes. As of right now, I believe that it's for the best that we try to establish communications with the continent south to us, seeing that they are the closest and are less of a threat. The only issue is that the fortifications on its coast is like the French Maginot Line from World War II, except for with much more forts and no weak spots. We aren't sure if our ships will be fired upon if they try to get close. Might as well prepare, Katerina. I want a couple of ships to depart within a week. I will give you whatever ships that you seem fit to try and meet with these people. Understood, Mr. President. 0500 early hour, quiet 71st, 195A. 1000 August 10, 2019 CE. Port of Stelsal, Kingdom of Albia, Soane Continent. It was early hour at the port of Stelsal. Men were loading up a metal ship that was sitting in the port. Chief Mate Henry Rolfe was running to his captain. Captain Raoul, what's happening? Why are we departing so quickly? We just came back from the Septentrio Magus Imperium yesterday. We got orders from the Magusians through the Magraph. One of their great Magus felt a disturbance on Formido. The questioning sailor who was running toward the captain stopped. The Formidan continent? Yes. What else? There's no other location by that name. Henry was visible with fear. Sir, why do we have to go there? None of us are going to survive if we get near Formido. Haven't you heard of those horrifying tales of giant birds devouring men and sinking ships? Orders are orders. The only reason that the Magusians even allowed me to buy this beauty was that I agreed to pay a high sum, keep the technology secret, and follow their orders when they needed us. The sailor sighed at his captain. Sir, couldn't we have just bought an armed Soane merchant ship? Why do we have to buy an armed merchant ship built by the Magusians? It's obvious. Soane ships are copied from 145A designs of Magusian ships that the Magusians gave to the League. This ship was built by the Magusians in 180A. There are massive differences. Look at its beauty and majesticness. No other Soane owns a ship this advanced. The captain started rambling about the greatness of his ship. Captain, anyways, don't worry about it. We have guns around the ship to protect us. At most this is just a 30-day round trip. We only need to take a look at Formido and then return. We don't even need to land. 1000 August 26, 2019 CE. Washington, D.C., United States of America. After the United States was transported to this new world, the Navy decided to reorganize itself and split its ships into 7 fleets that surrounded the United States and the northern frontier. Just a few hours ago, a ship was detected by the U.S. First Fleet. The First Fleet patrolled the ocean from Maine to the tip of Florida. The ship was detected miles off the tip of Florida. Through satellite imagery, the ship was identified as a late 18th, early 19th century steamship. The president was once again in the Situation Room with his cabinet. People, this will be a very important event in U.S. history. Our first contact with people of another world. Although it isn't under our terms as we wanted it to be, we still have to meet them. We don't know if they will be hostile. We don't know anything. From our satellite images, we can only deduce that they may be inferior to us in technology. However, that might not be the case. We can't just base their capabilities on how they seem. Meanwhile, the USS George Washington and its carrier strike group were currently heading towards the steamship. 0500 early hour, quiet 87th, 195A. 1000 August 26, 2019 CE. About 40 miles off the coast of Florida, Captain Ryokou was looking through a spyglass. One of the older and veteran sailors came up to him. "Hey, Captain, what y'all looking at? There's nothing out there. It all a calm." The captain looked at the bearded sailor. "Doesn't it seem weird?" "What y'all mean seem weird? Usually at this point, we should be able to spot some of those giant birds in the distance, but I see none." "Well, Captain, we may be lucky. Maybe. The captain went back into the ship after looking for a while. At this time most of the sailors were relaxing and talking. None of them noticed the ships that were approaching them from the distance. 1009 August 26, 2019 CE. Rear Admiral, we have visual on the steamship. Rear Admiral lower half Kennedy looked towards the steamship that they were approaching. He was the commander of the carrier strike group that consisted of the Nimitz-class nuclear aircraft carrier that he was on, a Ticonderoga-class guided missile cruiser, 2 Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, a Virginia-class nuclear attack submarine, and a supply ship. Rear Admiral Kennedy thought that the addition of the submarine was overkill. In reality, they probably only needed the aircraft carrier, destroyers, and the cruiser. Although it was only a single steamship, the higher-ups were being very cautious. 0507 Early Hour, Quiet 87th, 195A. 10:15 August 26, 2019 CE. Captain, there is a big group of ships that are currently approaching us. The crew of the steamship started to take notice and ask questions. Why are their ships so close to Formido? Are those mock Imperium ships? Some started to feel uncomfortable. Turn back. If those are Machian warships, we are done for. A clear and strong voice was heard. It was the captain. Everyone, get back to your stations. You are sailors of the Kingdom of Albia, a part of the League of Seoul. Have some pride and bravery. A short silence followed. Then Chief Mate Henry Rolfe spoke up. Sir, those could be Machian warships. Chief Mate, have some sense. What would a group of Machian warships be doing so far away from their home? The Machians should still be tied up in a stalemate and uneasy peace with the Magusians. They won't send any ships to Formido if they don't have to. I get the feeling this related to disturbance that the great Magus felt. We will close in on those ships. The captain looked towards the ships. Also Chief Mate Rolfe, tell the Magraph operator to send a message to the Magusians. Tell the Magusians that we have discovered ships of unknown origins near the continent of Formido. The crew felt apprehensive but didn't ask any further questions. As the captain said, they were sailors of their kingdom and the Glorious League. Their apprehension grew as they got closer to the ships. The ships looked massive, especially the one in the middle. Their apprehension lessened a bit when they noticed that 3 of the ships had only what seemed to be a singular gun on each of them. The unidentified ships seemed to be a few poorly armed ships protecting a massive merchant ship. On the other hand, although their ship had 8 guns placed around it and the unidentified warships were poorly armed, they were still outnumbered 3-1 when it came to fighting capable ship numbers. 10:16 August 26, 2019 CE. Rear Admiral lower half Kennedy looked through his binoculars. Captain Jones, who was the commander of the USS George Washington, was looking too. Rear Admiral, it seems like they noticed us. How should we proceed? I suppose we could try to get closer or we could send an RHIB. Sir, I'm against the getting closer idea. They might open fire on us if we get closer. I suggest we send an RHIB so they feel less threatened. Chapter 4 First Contact. 0511 Early Hour, Quiet 87th, 195A. 10:22 August 26, 2019 CE. About 40 miles off the coast of Florida. As the steamship got closer, a smaller ship seems to have appeared from one of the armed ships. Look at that, they seem to be sending some people over. Captain Ryokou looked through his spyglass. Let them approach us, we outnumber them and I don't see any weapons. 10:22 August 26, 2019 CE. Petty Officer First Class Glenn Jackson was on the RHIB with 11 other seamen and petty officers. They were each carrying an M4 carbine rifle that they received from their destroyer's armory. They were on their way to the steamship. Remember, our job is to only tell them to follow our ships so we can get them to land and probably get them to some diplomat that flying into a port in Key West. Don't raise your weapons unless you're threatened. Yes, sir. Oh boy, I'm definitely not qualified for this. They should send some sort of diplomat or something. A few minutes later, They arrived and positioned their RHIB next to the steamship. A rope was thrown down to them. That seemed quite hospitable of them. Well, up I go. Ah, well, this was as expected. What greeted Jackson on the ship was a few men aiming what seemed to be ancient muskets at him. Jackson's men also got onto the ship and they raised their rifles upon seeing the situation. The moment was tense until a man that was dressed in what seemed like what a captain of a ship from the 18th century would wear stepped forward and offered what seemed to be a handshake. Huh, seems like the handshake is multiversal. Is multiversal a word? Jackson gladly shook his hand smiling. The 18th century captain smiled back. Nice to meet you. I'm Petty Officer First Class Jackson of the United States Navy. I came from one of the ships over there. He just stood there and stared at Jackson in confusion. What? Sorry, I didn't get that. Can you repeat that? What? Ah, crap, language barrier, of course. This is a different world. Do you understand me? Then the captain turned to someone next to him. Rowley, try speaking the common language to them. What do I say, sir? Just tell them, nice to meet you, and see how he responds. The man that the captain talked to looked at us and spoke. Nice to meet you. Still not English, but it sounds weirdly familiar. One of the seamen behind Jackson spoke up. Sir, I think that's Latin. Jackson looked behind him at the seaman that spoke up. The seaman explained. I learned it in high school. Then do you understand what they are saying? It seems like they said something along the lines of, nice to meet you. I don't quite remember much about what I learned in Latin, so I can't really speak it. Any of you guys know how to speak Latin? Jackson's entire team shrugged. Guess I could try gesturing. Jackson started pointing at the deck of the steamship and then pointing at the fleet. Then he started gesturing in a waving motion towards his fleet. This feels dumb. The captain was confused at first, but something sparked in his eyes. He started by pointing to himself and then at his ship and then pointed towards the fleet. Jackson immediately nodded and hoped that he understood. 0515 early hour, quiet 87th, 195A. 10:30 August 26, 2019 CE. Captain Raoul watched as the weirdly uniformed men that came from those ships got off of his ship. A sailor piped up. What did they want, Captain? I think they wanted us to follow them. Follow them? They may be trying to bring us to their base. I think we should follow. Another sailor joined the conversation. But Captain, it could be a trap. Discussion among the other sailors started to erupt. Some wanted to turn back while others wanted to sally forth for adventure. The captain raised his voice. They are too poorly armed to make this trap successful. We could stay a distance behind them but still follow. We were tasked with this job and I want to see it through. Chief Mate Rolf. Yes, sir. Have we gotten a reply from the Magusians? Seeing that our Magraph operator has yet to report, I believe it takes around 15 minutes to get a message to them using magic. 0820 early hour, quiet 87th, 195A. 10:40 August 26, 2019 CE. Primapolis, Septentrio Magus Imperium, Domum Imperatoria Continent. A tired and haggard man was sitting in his chair looking over papers on his desk. Although he was only 51, he looked like someone who just turned 65. There was pounding on the door. Your Majesty, Your Majesty, Your Majesty, Your Majesty. Calarius Arstant, the fourth emperor of the Septentrio Magus Imperium, calmly replied. Enter, Your Majesty. Calarius looked up from his papers. Yes, you have Cal. His personal messenger cut him off and started rapidly speaking. We got report that the ship Wesanto had seen other ship not Machianasput in Formido. Calarius smiled lightly and started chuckling. Your Majesty. His personal messenger was a fumbling young man named Robertus Casca. The main reason that he was Calarius's personal messenger was that he was fast. However, there was a problem. The problem was that he was fast at everything, speaking included, but this made the day feel easier for Calarius. Something calmed him about this overexcited and bumbling young man. Calarius smiled. Calm down, Robertus, I couldn't understand what you said. Now, what report? Yes, Your Majesty. I mean Your Majesty. Robertus started calming down. We got a message from the Albine ship that was sent to check out the disturbance that was felt by the Great Magus. It appears there was a group of mysterious ships there. They don't seem to belong to any known nation. It is possible they came from Formido and was related to the disturbance. Calarius was immediately interested. 12:30 August 26, 2019 CE. Near Key West, Florida. Rear Admiral Kennedy was standing in the bridge. When the team sent to establish contact with the steamship came back, they learned two things. First of all, it seems that the people on the steamship seemed to speak Latin. Washington was informed about this. They are now trying to get a Latin translator to the diplomat in Key West. Second of all, their guns are even more ancient than the steamship. They seem to be using some type of matchlock musket. Now they were closing in on the Key West. It took them an hour longer than expected because of the slow speed of the steamship. It really seemed to be from the 19th century. 0615 mid-hour, quiet 87th, 195A. 12:30 August 26, 2019 CE. The sailors had noticed the giant ships seemed to be much faster than their ship. It greatly confused them and they wondered if these weird ships came from one of the empires. No ship that big could be that fast unless it was from one of the empires. It couldn't possibly be from the Magyusians since the Magyusians asked them to come here. They hoped it wasn't a trap by the Machians. On the other hand, the lack of weaponry on the weird ships felt a bit reassuring. They also noticed that they were closing in on what seemed to be a small island with what seemed to be a city on it. The Magyusians had given Captain Raoul many orders through the Magraph. First of all, Captain Raoul needed to observe these ships and learn more about them. Second, the Magyusians wanted him to contact them immediately through the Magraph if these mysterious people lived on the Formodan continent. The Magyusians also told Raoul to stay there if they lived on Formodo. The Magyusians would send diplomats that would arrive within 7 days to establish relations with them and learn how they were able to live on Formodo. From what Captain Raoul could see, it seems like they lived in a big city on an island that was very close to Formodo. Rolf, tell the operator to tell the Magyusians that they seem to live very close to Formodo on an island. Yes, sir. 0623 mid-hour, quiet 87th, 195A. 12:46 August 26, 2019 CE. Key West. Captain Raoul, Chief Mate Rolf, and a few sailors including Rowley stepped down onto what seemed to be a port and surveyed the area. The giant ships also docked near them. Two men dressed in suits approached him. One of the men spoke. "Hello, do you understand me?" Rowley was excited and quickly looked to his captain. "Sir, they can speak common language." Rowley then looked towards the man. "Yes." The man shook hands with Rowley. "Nice to meet you. I'm Luke Hoffman. I'm a translator." "I'm Rowley Paulin. I'm also a translator." "The man to my right is the captain of my ship, Jacob Raoul. He can't speak the common language." "Common language? What you are speaking right now?" "Ah," the captain interrupted. "Rowley, what is he saying?" Rowley explained. When Rowley stopped explaining, Luke started talking. "To my right is a diplomat representing the government of the United States of America. Clark Underwood. United States of America, my country's name." Rowley and Luke turned towards their superiors and explained what had just been said. The captain proceeded to shook hands with the diplomat. From this point on Luke and Rowley translated whatever was said. "As you know, I'm Clark Underwood, a diplomat assigned to you. I will be representing my government. I hope we can get along. Likewise, I'm the captain of this ship. We are Albines sent here by the request of the Septentrio Magus Imperium." Albine, Septentrio Magus Imperium, countries. My country's name is the Kingdom of Albia. We are allied with the Septentrio Magus Imperium. The Septentrio Magus Imperium may send actual diplomats to meet with you. We are only here because they requested us when their Great Magus felt a disturbance. Clark was confused. Great Magus, disturbance, what is he talking about? I suppose I should just go along. Well, we don't know much about this world since we only arrived here about a month ago. We are Americans. The difference between how time was told was somewhat confusing, but the translators were able to explain to each other what they were talking about. Arrived here only a third of a season ago. Yes, my country was inexplicably transported here from our world. Now it was Raoul's time to get confused. We ourselves don't understand what happened. Anyways, what are your current plans? My government will accommodate you in every way possible. Raoul decided to think about it later. We will be staying here for about 7 days while the diplomats from the Magus Imperium travel here. Since you are staying here for a while, I suppose you can visit one of our bigger cities. Bigger city? We are currently in a small city called Key West. Raoul thought to himself, well, there is no palace or castle or anything here. They must be taking us to their capital. Probably another island. If you don't mind, Luke and I will be boarding your ship. One of our ships will lead you there. How will the Magyusian diplomats know where we are? Once our ships spot them, we will guide them over. Luke and Clark boarded the steamship and Captain Raoul told his crew to set sail and followed one of the armed American ships towards the city called Miami. Captain Raoul personally went to the Magraph operator and gave a message about what he found out. He also told the Magraph operator to ask for Magyusian diplomats. 0300 early hour, quiet 88th, 195A. 2200 August 26, 2019 CE. Industripolis, Mach Imperium, Domum Imperatoria Continent. Your Highness, we have gotten reports from the spies we sent to the Septentrio Magus recently. The new wireless telegraphy technology has proven its use. There is some information on here that may interest you. Desmond Industris, the 5th Emperor of the Mach Imperium, was viewing the report that his servant gave him. His advisor was talking to him. A possible country on Formido, that's interesting. It is possible that they are descendants of the people that we sent there decades ago. Well sir, then that means that they should still be your subjects.